Hey guys, what's up? It's Brittany here with Midwest Performance, and on today's show of the Coffee with MP show, we're talking with Roshni about you, your food, and your emotions.
We're Midwest Performance. We're on a mission to empower women around the world to take action and work hard to make a physical impact in their lives. In this very saturated fitness industry, there's tons of competition, but the opportunities are incredible. We'll cover the most common challenges in the fitness world and invite guests to the show that have learned to overcome them and share their strategies with you. This is the Coffee with MP show.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Brittany. We're back with another episode of the Coffee with MP show, and today we have a really special guest with us. Roshni is here, and I'm going to let Roshni kind of introduce herself and her title, what she does, and kind of the topic that we're going to be talking about today. So Roshni, why don't you go ahead and tell our audience about yourself and what you do?
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Roshni. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor with the long title, which what that basically means is I'm a therapist, and I work predominantly with eating disorders, emotional eating, and I think that's why I'm here today, is to kind of talk about why we choose to eat what we eat, and how that actually helps us to regulate our emotions, because I don't think a lot of us understand that, myself included, is that emotions do impact what we eat and vice versa.
Absolutely. So I think I want to dive right into this, Roshni, and I think this is a really important topic, and I'm so glad that you're here to talk about this today. I think this is going to be a really great one because, like I was telling you pre-episode, I think there's a lot of women here that struggle with this that maybe we don't know about, and so I'm hoping that this will touch them in one way or another. So first, let's start with like the definition of emotional eating and what that actually looks like clinically.
Okay, so clinically, the best way I can break it down without sounding too formal, right, is that if we're choosing to go to food for anything, if I'm feeling depressed or anxious or overly worked up or frustrated, and I turn to food as an outlet, and then usually feel kind of upset or guilty or frustrated even after the fact that I ate, or I ate too much, and I'm not really thinking rationally, is usually the definition of like overeating or clinically eating due to, emotions, if that makes sense.
Which is crazy because it's like you think you're going to eat and it's going to make you feel better, and then it just ends up making you feel worse. Which is so wild that even there's so many people that still do it. And it's not, some people out there who maybe aren't educated on what emotional eating is, or maybe aren't educated on whether they have it or not, think like, how come I just can't get over this? How come I just can't get better?
It's a cycle, right? It's definitely a cycle. And I think that we kind of as a society set ourselves up. I know we were talking about this before, is that, we look at food as good or bad. And how does that not tie into our emotions feeling good or bad? Is that if I'm saying, I want to clean eat and eat healthy, quote unquote, like veggies and, those types of things, but that's going to make me feel happy and content. And then the negative foods like chips or pizza or cake are going to make me feel bad. But does that always align with actually how we're feeling?
Right, which is kind of crazy because even sometimes when you are eating super healthy, after a while you start to feel bad because you're like irritated that you have to give up all of the stuff that you really like, right? So, and then when you feel like you want to fall off of that track and then you go eat the bad foods, it's just like a sick cycle. It really is like a sick cycle, which is crazy. So let's talk a little bit about some of the key things that you look for in your patients, or that you would look for in a person who may be struggling with emotional eating.
That's a good point. So I think the main criteria is that it's too much of one thing, right? So if it's and flexibility, the rigidity, right, is what I look for. So if you told me that, okay, I only eat salads every single day of the week, and then I say, okay, what if you were to put in a sandwich of some sort for lunch instead of a salad? And you said, nope, absolutely not, I can't do that. That rigidity there is kind of a red flag, right? It's more of, that's what I look for, is, are you flexible with your dieting? Are you willing to have that, piece of cake when you go out to a birthday party, or have a drink or whatnot, versus, nope, I can't do that at all. I'm very rigid. I can't move or budge from this. So that's number one I look for. Number two I look for is that when you do fall off that wagon, so to speak, is it binge eating? Are you eating, like looking for the highest caloric, sugar intake things like I'm looking for, I'm going to eat a whole tub of ice cream, or I'm going to eat a whole bag of cookies. You know, I look for the extremes in those. But I think for us too, just generally speaking as a gym and like people that I see here, you may have those people that fall on those extreme categories. But I think for the average woman like myself, I do find myself, you know, looking at the indicators being more of I'm eating when I'm sad or I'm eating when I'm anxious, and it doesn't have to be those two extremes. Does that make sense?
Yep, it makes sense. And I think something else too that I have noticed is people who eat because they feel like they've done so well that now they just want to, now they're rewarding themselves with food, which I think is part of it too, right? So I think that it's all spectrums, right? There's really like two key main triggers, like you said, is the rigidity on the one side of like no flexibility at all, and then there's the other side of things where if you do get triggered by something, you immediately sit down with a pint of Ben & Jerry's in front of Netflix, and that's just what you do, and the next day you wake up and you're like, I can't believe I did that,
and you feel guilt. And I think, you know, one of the big things is for the average woman that comes into here that doesn't maybe show those two spectrums, the two, you know, opposite poles, is that, you know, what am I getting out of it? If I'm rewarding myself, why do I feel like I need that reward? Does that make sense? As opposed to how do I incorporate that into my daily life so it doesn't feel like, oh, this is going to make me happy because I worked so hard. It doesn't necessarily.
It doesn't make sense, right? And I think that sometimes we get a little caught up in like, if I hit a goal, then I get this. Or if I hit, you know, if I get to this size, I get this. And it shouldn't really necessarily be like that. And I think we talked a little bit about the nutrition program that I run here with the flexible dieting and the tracking of macros, because you've just got to learn to fit it all in, because at the end of the day, like we talked before, and I agree with you 100%, like you said, diets are just they're BS. They really are. It makes no sense. Why do you need to be on a diet? What's the point when you can have everything that you want in moderation?
You know what's really interesting about that? I just from my experience, I'm not going to say this is a stat, but this is I've probably worked in behavioral health for about 10 years now. And my experience with eating disorders, especially our young like women that come into it, it's just doctors telling them like, hey, you need to lose a little bit of weight because you're on that like spectrum of, you know, obesity or whatnot. But they don't teach them how to do it, right? And so they do these crash diets. They do this restrictive,
They go to Google.
They go to Google. They, you know, they buy pills. They do all these things. And yes, tying into your nutrition, tying into your nutrition program, it makes complete sense because, you know, for those people that have gone to like boot camps, or myself included, I've done this, is you lose that initial weight because you're cutting out the carb, or you're cutting, like if you look at all diets on the market right now, everything cuts something out.
Yep, absolutely.
Completely. And then what happens when you get back on your regular everyday
your
sustainable diet? Your sustainable lifestyle, you start to gain it back, right? And almost immediately. So, you know, what I like about your program and what I've known about it and learned about it is the fact that you can incorporate fats, proteins, you know, sugars that are important. Like your body essentially craves all these things, and it's necessary. It's just about this is my motto at work, is that it's not how much it's not what you're eating, it's how much of it you're eating.
100%
So instead of putting foods again in categories, restrictive dieting, it's about getting all foods. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And I think that sometimes as women and as a society, we've really been taught to be restrictive, when all the way back to Slim Fast and Atkins and the South Beach diet, now the Atkins diets, now the keto diet, and they're, you know, the 30-day whole 30 challenge, and like all these different things. And it's like, listen, why do you need all of this stuff when you can have your cake and eat it too? You just have to understand what a whole cake looks like and what a piece of cake looks like. What a serving of something looks like versus a whole bag of something. And that's really what it comes down to.
It comes down to that, and we call it intuitive eating, right? In the clinical world, is that when you're hungry, listening to actually your body's hunger cues, as opposed to listening to the emotional cues, right? So it's focusing on, okay, my stomach's growling or my mouth is salivating. You know, I know this sounds really weird.
But
we
it
don't
makes
really
sense.
notice these things, but maybe we should, instead of saying, well, my mind feels really sad right now, and so I want to treat myself. Instead of focusing on those things, focusing on the hunger cues, I think makes more sense.
And I think that that's a learned thing.
Sure.
It really is.
Absolutely.
It's not something that you just find overnight, because I'll guarantee, 5 years ago, I did not know how to do that. And now, like, even Marcia will remind me, I'll say, like, I'm hungry. And she's like, okay, well, if you're really hungry, then eat. Like, if that's what you're really feeling. Or am I bored? I kind of analyze my situation and where I'm at and what I'm doing. Like, if I'm at home on a weekend and we're watching movies and I just ate like an hour ago, but then I'm like, man, I could go for something else. I'm like, okay, wait. But I am still kind of full from earlier, so I'm really not hungry. I'm just bored. So, like, I'll do something else, or like go do something else, or I'll grab more water or something like that. But if I really am hungry, like to the point of like, okay, yeah, that's a hunger pain, then I eat.
Absolutely.
And that's, you kind of have to find that distinction.
You have to find that, or if you're thirsty. Like, people always confuse dehydration for hunger as well, is that drink some water.
Right.
People don't like water, but there's all this like flavoring you can put in it.
I put BCAAs in mine every day.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, drink water. Hydration is important too.
Yeah.
It's recognizing your hunger cues, what triggers you emotionally, right? So if you had a bad day and you're going to go and stop at wherever and pick up the biggest meal you can, probably not a good idea. Address why you're doing it.
Exactly. And I think that sometimes is so hard because we just want that instant gratification.
Absolutely.
If we're feeling something and we want to get over it now, we instantly want to take care of it. So the first fast food restaurant we see, we drive to the drive-thru, we eat it, and then all of a sudden we feel good for a second, and then you don't feel good. And then, so for me, like I shared with you earlier, I struggled with bulimia, and that's kind of how it was. It was like I would eat, and then I would feel good, but then as soon as I ate, I would be like, okay, I got to get it out. And like I feel like that's the same way that happens with people who emotionally eat. They they for a second you feel good, and then like 2 minutes after, you're like, okay, I should not have done that. Now I feel terrible. Now I might as well go home and eat the whole cupboard because I just messed that up. And then that happens, and it's a sick cycle.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it goes with, binge eating, restrictive eating, all of it. All of any type of eating that we're talking about today goes back to the emotion, right? Is that I never feel happy once I use food as a way to cope. Right? So that's what I always, when I treat my patients, it comes down to, okay, we're managing the symptomology, which is getting them in a structured environment with food. So we're going to do 3 meals, 3 snacks a day, or, whatever they need, working with a dietitian. But that's just the surface. The secondary is that, what emotion is that, what is the food dealing with? So is it dealing with me feeling depressed? Is it me feeling anxious? Is it me feeling bored? Overwhelmed? Whatever those emotions are, let's cope with them using actual coping mechanisms, like working out, or even like reading a book, walking, journaling. Those are really good ways to kind of manage.
You gotta go the other direction. And I tell my girls that too, like that I work with on the nutrition program, because not only do I do nutrition with them, but I do a lot of mindset. And I'm not a therapist, but I've been through this stuff before, so I think that firsthand experience, knowing the things that I've done and the things that I can help them do is like finding a different outlet. Every time you feel, oh, I had a bad day at work, oh, I had this, okay, well, you've got to find a different outlet. You've either got to read a book, go for a walk, play with your kids, like listen to your favorite song, like go for a drive, like you've got to
I think a big part of it too is that we're not aware, right? Like you said. So if you guys are the ones that are kind of like, am I in this spectrum? Is this something I'm dealing with? Start journaling your thoughts, right? So put them on paper. I call it emotional log, right? Is like, okay, on one side of the piece of paper, I write down what time of day it is, maybe what event maybe led to this, and then on the right side, the emotions that I'm feeling, okay? And if you kind of start keeping track and noticing that it's a pattern, then I usually turn to food after these situations. Therefore, it just kind of organizes maybe your triggers and you understand them a little bit.
That's a really great tool, I think, that a lot of people can take to use is that emotional journaling, because when you write it down, it becomes real, and like you literally can read it on a piece of paper, like, okay, like this is weird, like the last week I've been doing this, and every single day it's been after I get home from work or something, or I got my son's report card or whatever the case may be, but it could be a consistent trigger that you're not even aware of until you actually see it on a piece of paper, which I think is crazy. So let's talk, now that we've kind of talked about what emotional eating is and all of the things that come with it, let's talk about some real life. We talked about the journaling, but I want to talk about some real life things that these girls can do to kind of get that switch flipped?
Yeah. First of all, don't feel like you have to do it alone.
Right.
You know, if you see me and you want to approach me, absolutely, I'm happy to, guide you to where you might need to go. But I also think that that's the biggest setback for people is that they're nervous. They're nervous to say anything. I mean, I can admit that I was nervous coming into here the first day. But, I think the biggest part is you don't ever have to do it alone.
Right.
There's resources, there's people, there's support groups, there's all levels of care for it, and you don't get diagnosed as an eating disorder patient
and you're not
by
crazy.
any means. No, you're not crazy. There's no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's none of that. So stigma out the window for a second. The other thing, I think the next step is structure.
Okay.
I think structure and organizing your daily routine is really, really important. We're creatures of habit.
Absolutely.
So if you're trying to change a habit, just like you come into the gym and you work out and you have your 9:20 class, that's a shout out to them.
Yeah.
But if you always go to that class, then you kind of know that they're expecting you, right? So same thing with your food and emotions, is that you want to create a structure throughout your week. If meal prep is helpful, do it on a Sunday night for the week. If it's the journaling, if you're starting to recognize that, I need an outlet at the end of the day, I need to set something up between the time I get home and giving myself an hour at least to kind of unwind, journal, bubble bath, walk, talk to a friend, something, right? I think it's trying to create a routine that you do it every single day. Same thing with food. Is that you're not going to do restrictive food organization. So what we want to do is trying to incorporate, if you look at your meal plan for the week and you say, okay, I'm eating salads all week, can I change it up?
Right.
Can I try to add a few things throughout the week and see how you feel about it? I think structure is probably the number one issue with people, is that we try to do routines and then we give up because we set our expectations up here. So don't try to change your whole week in one day.
Right.
So try to do it one day at a time and build up to a whole week of structure. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. Okay. The crazy thing that I think makes the most sense with that is that there's a couple girls that have come in the last weekend, signed up to come to the gym, like be members here. And what I've told them when they first come in is, don't try to do all of this stuff at once. Just come to class. Just come to class.
Absolutely.
That's all I need you to do for the first 60 days. Just come to class and get in your routine with your class, and then start working on your nutrition. Because I think what happens is we want to do everything all at once. We want everything to be fixed, and all of a sudden it's a giant train wreck. 2 weeks in, and we're like, can't do this.
And you know what? Personally speaking, okay, I know everything about emotional eating. I mean, I'm trained in it, I do it, but I'm guilty of engaging in it too, right? So the first month that I was here and I spoke to Ashley, I was like, I'm not losing any weight, what's going on? And she's like, well, let's do your measurements. And I think you like said that to me too. You were like excited about my measurements, but my weight didn't change, the number didn't change, but that's okay. And I think I realized that I couldn't do all of it at once. I couldn't change my meals and start working out 4 to 5 to 6 times a week and expect myself to sustain it. So I think after being in it for a month is when I started to change around food. So I noticed protein needed to be added. So I added a little bit of that. It is experimental, right? Because everybody needs a little bit of something different. So you're right. You can't do it all at once, especially emotionally. If you do, you're setting yourself up to fail because we all are human and we all make mistakes. But if we keep sticking to that and saying well, I keep failing, we're never going to want to get up and try it again, whether it's food, whether it's emotional management, whether it's the gym.
I love that. I love that because I go back to the girls that I work with in nutrition, and some of them fall off the wagon, and I'm there to be like, that's okay, because life happens sometimes. Shit happens. It does. And life gets in the way, and it will always get in the way until you're 6 feet under the ground. And you just have to learn to handle it and deal with it and know that you've got a structure you can go right back to, and you know it works every single time. And you can't allow yourself to be ruled for the rest of your life by I suck at this, I'm just going to give up and quit. It's like, no, because if you continue to do that, you'll do it for the rest of your life. And that is just it's just the same thing with eating. If you fall off the wagon once and you just give it all up, then you're just going to continue to do it all over again. You just have to give yourself a little bit of grace.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's also setting, be realistic with your expectations. It's obviously all of us want to do it all at once and just kind of get it done. But is that feasible and maintainable? It's not. And I think that's where we crash and burn emotionally is like, okay, well, I failed, but my expectation was up here to do it all at once. It's not possible. Be gentle with ourselves. I think that's what we forget as women too, is that we forget to be kind to ourselves. We forget to like take care of ourselves emotionally. And that's what kind of strives us to do everything else after that, right? The food, the gym, taking care of our kids, our families, all of that work, that all comes secondary to like our mental health, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
That's kind of where you start.
It is too, and I think that, again, to that same point, is that I've always told the girls here, you've got to make yourself a priority first.
Absolutely.
You have to make you a priority first, because if you don't put yourself on the pedestal, there is nobody else in your life will ever put you on that pedestal, and you won't be able to give 100% of yourself to your kids, to your spouse, to your work, to your friends, to yourself. You'll never be able to do that, only because you can't put yourself on that pedestal first. So that's a huge thing. So this was great. I think this was really, really good, and I think that this is gonna hit home for some people out there. I think it really is. So where can they find you? Let's just say somebody wants to reach out to you and they would like to see you, speak with you. Where can they find you?
Okay, so maybe you can link it, the information, but I work for Northwest Psychiatry, which is in South Barrington. So if you do nwpsych.us, that's our website.
Okay.
If you come up to me here at the gym, that's totally fine. And I'll give Brittany my information, and I'll put out my email too, my work email. So if you guys want to shoot me an email, if that's better, that's totally fine as well.
Because I think this is going to prompt some questions and some good discussion from some people of like maybe diving a little bit deeper into some actual things that they can do, or maybe come and sit down and like have a session with you and just kind of go over the things that they're feeling. I always tell people, Caitlin De La Cruz was on here before back in February, and I remember sitting and talking to her, because some people are like, I don't want to talk to a therapist. And that's everybody, you know, sometimes you just, like you said, you can't do this alone. Some things you just can't handle alone, and that's okay.
And the one thing I'll say about therapy is I totally get it. You know, I totally get the stigma that comes to, oh my gosh, it's so clinical. You know what? I'm pretty real. This is how I am in session. I'm very real. I'm very myself, very much myself, is because over the years, I did start off as being that therapist that's like, how do you feel today?
Right.
And that's not me. That's not who I am. And I don't think that relates to many people. And so I try to be as real as possible. If you do come up to me, just remember, it's going to stay between us. It's not, and it might not necessarily be me. I can refer you to somebody that can help as well. So I do have a ton of resources. I have dietitians, I have clinical, professionals that definitely work with this and other things. So feel free.
Cool. Yeah. All right. With that being said, Roshni, thank you so much for coming on today. This was a great episode. I think this is going to be a really, really good one. Like Roshni said, ladies, please feel free to reach out to her, to reach out to me. If you have any questions about anything, we would be more than happy to help. Always know that you're not alone here. Always know that no matter what you're struggling with, no matter what you're going through, you have someone here to talk to, whether it's one of our coaches, whether it's one of our members, whether it's one of our other staff. Don't ever be afraid to come and reach out and just be like, hey, like I could use some advice or some help. We're always here to help. So with that being said, ladies, thank you so much for tuning in this week, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for joining us today. If you like this episode, subscribe to our YouTube channel or find our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever your favorite places to listen to podcasts might be. And if you really liked this episode, please leave a review for us on iTunes. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.